Hello, girls, guys, or otherwise. This is Rich, and today is the book study Saturday, and we're going through The Inner Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penczak. I will try to leave a link. I can't remember if I left a link last time on where you can find this. I'm doing this on my iPad. It is currently Friday whenever I'm filming this, and at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I wanted to try to do this on the iPad just because I want to get this done. I have some things that I want to do later tonight, and I have to be back in work tomorrow morning, so I want to kind of free up some of that time. So occasionally you'll see me at work and whatnot. Just ignore the stuff in the background. You see over here is my lunchbox. Yeah, over here is my planner. Maybe I'll do a planner tour of how I set up my planner and whatnot. Maybe I'll do that in the future. Even though some of the best laid plans don't really turn out. So it doesn't work if you don't look at the planner itself. I am currently drinking some chai tea. This is, I believe, a Bigelow brand. Hold on just a second. Let me see if I can see the tea bag here. Yep, this is, oh no, this is Twinings. Twinings chai ultra spice. So, with some sugar and whatnot. Some of you Brits out there might be cringing that I add sugar to my tea, like almost always to my tea, almost always. But I just have a sweet tooth, and yeah, whenever it comes to tea, I need that extra sweetness, and honey doesn't really do it for me. Anyway, I'm getting way off topic. This is not just a regular vlog. We have a purpose. We are going through chapter 3. This is entitled Flavors of Witchcraft. Certain parts of this chapter I am not going to really touch on as much, and I'll explain why whenever I get there. Okay, so I'm starting off on page 41. This is the second paragraph, and Christopher writes, "Finding material on Italian witchcraft was a revelation because we were not initially exposed to it." Okay, and I can kind of relate to this. And in this chapter as an overall, it tells of different traditions of witchcraft, some of the bare basics of traditional witchcraft and whatnot, such as creating a circle, sacred space, stuff like that, but it only lightly touches on them, and I appreciate that. I don't really know if we get into that further on down. I think we do get into certain aspects like that further on down into different chapters and whatnot. Anyway, so bare basics are covered in here. He covers some of the Sabbats and whatnot, which I will cover in other videos, either on the Christo-Pagan Sundays or the Witchy Wednesdays. I think I have them scheduled for the Christo-Pagan Sundays, because this being primarily a Christo-Pagan channel, or at least me expressing my my Christo-Pagan faith and practice, I do gear more towards that. So yeah. Anyway, whenever he says finding material on Italian witchcraft, he's talking about his mother really getting into Italian witchcraft, because that is what they were descendants of, even though most of the stuff that you find out there is of Celtic slant. And he says finding material on Italian witchcraft was a revelation because we were not initially exposed to it. And I write in the margins. This is like the first time I've ever written in margins in a book, and it's kind of terrifying to me, being a book purist. But I write in here, I say, this is somewhat how I felt when I found Sophia and Gnosticism. Not really talked about in many pagan circles. Yeah, Gnosticism, you don't really hear it talked about in many of the pagan circles. Possibly, and I don't know how true this is, but in my experience, it might be because it is considered a branch of Christianity and whatnot. I'm just gonna fix my collar there. I tried to look a little dapper, and the collar of my shirt's not really working for me today. It's not working in my best interest. Anyway, you don't hear much about Gnosticism or Christo-Paganism talked about in pagan circles, and even Sophia, you don't hear much about Sophia being talked about in pagan circles, and I really wish it were. I kind of think back about the times whenever I could have known or could have been studying more into certain practices and beliefs, and kind of the time lost there. However, I am making up for lost time and sharing my journey along with you guys. So, yeah, I kind of felt the same way whenever I came to starting to research Gnosticism and came to know Sophia, as I do now. On the next page, under the common ground, I love that he looks at how at what unites us first, is my first note here. And he writes, before we learn the differences between traditions, let's look at the fundamental similarities. I love that. There are so many common threads that run between one practice and another, and I think it's important to note that and to be honoring those parts that we can pretty much almost universally agree on within the pagan community. Yeah, you might have a couple people out there that say, I don't care about the environment, I just want to do the witchcraft. You do have those people. And then you have those people who are, I don't care about the witchcraft, I just care about nature. And I mean, you'll get the extremes of both sides. However, I think the main part of paganism is that there are individuals out there that care about the environment, care about the magic and the craft, and deepening their own personal relationships with whatever deity they work with. And I think noting the similarities and noting what brings us together is really important whenever you're talking about a group overall of witchcraft or of paganism in general. Similarities are important. And then he puts this next sentence in, and I think it's just an important thing to note, and I kind of want to reiterate or reverberate this. He says, witchcraft is a personal path, and these beliefs may not be held by every individual, but they are commonly accepted by the mainstream pagan community. Love that. Thank you for noting that. In the next paragraph, about halfway down, he writes, church officials wanted to place pagan beliefs and practices with wanted to replace pagan beliefs and practices with Christian ones, so much so that pagan holidays were adopted into the Christian calendar to get converts. Sorry about the tongue-tied, but I'm probably not going to edit much of this down, if anything, unless I get like a call at work or something like that, or have to go do something. Then I'll, pause you guys and come back whenever all that's done. But for the most part, I'm not going to really edit much of this down. And anyway, I write in here, I said, yes, many of the holidays of today have pagan roots. And I put my own little grievance in here. Can we stop with bringing it up every year? Just about every single year. I see around Easter time or, Ostar time. I see around Halloween. I see around, or Samhain, Halloween, Samhain. And I see around Christmas and Yule time. I see every year pagans out there that will post all over social media, like, this was a stolen holiday. You know what? We can all just agree to get along, and that's okay. It's okay for, different religions to celebrate their holidays around the same time as yours. And yes, there may be a lot of similarities, but they've adapted things to become their own, and they celebrate in a different way than we do. And that's okay. And it's my own little personal grievance that every year without fail there will be people that will bring this up every single year and be outraged by Christians out there that say Happy Easter, and somebody else will post on there Happy Ostara, Easter was stolen and blah blah blah, all that stuff. Regardless of whether or not it's true, and it is, I think most scholars would agree that it is true, it is a fact. But regardless of that, do we really have to bring it up every single year, and kind of rub people's noses in it? No, we don't. We can just be like, okay, you know what? Happy holidays. Thank you. Now, if you have somebody that is arguing with you and saying Christ is the reason for the season, that type of thing, then you know what? Go ahead and kind of put them in their place and say, actually, Yule was around a long time before Christmas. However, for you, he's the reason of the season. Great on you. But historically, most scholars would, tend to disagree. So, in situations like that, you can have a civil discussion, and I think it's okay for that. We don't need to be having arguments every single year about this. So, just my own little hot take on that. And I am drinking a lot of tea today. Kind of a lot of tea. This is my first cup. Probably not going to be my last cup of the day. Anyway, moving on down to the bottom of that paragraph. He says, I've spoken to few witches who feel witches or Wiccans are clergy of the pagan people, but most strictly pagan folk I know would not agree with that definition. Technically, we are neo-witches and neo-pagans, meaning new, but few people use this term outside of academic writings. Okay, couple notes. One, thanks for stating that there is a difference, that most of the time it is acknowledged by academia rather than by lay people like most of us that are reading this book. This is not an academic text in and of itself, and we should not treat it as that, even though I nitpick a lot about little things. I also have a note here. It says, I can see why this is said, and I sort of agree, but I also disagree as well. Pagans are clergy for themselves in their own respective traditions. Wiccans are their own clergy within their respective traditions. But pagans in general, we don't usually have clergy outside of our own traditions. Can you respect somebody and be totally for them being a wise counsel or being an ordained person within their own tradition? Absolutely. And it's fine to call them, grandmaster or, let's see, what are some other ones? High priestess, high priest. You can call them, father, reverend, whatever their moniker is. Like my title is technically reverend. So yeah, I don't usually use it that often, but technically I do have the title of reverend. And yeah, every once in a while I bust that out and be like, hey, ordained here. But moving on from that, not that hard to do. Moving on from that, well, before we move on from that, I kind of agree that, you know, Wiccans or neo-Wiccans can be wise counsel and can be individuals that can be looked to as clergy folk. However, I also disagree that in paganism as a whole, they are not the clergy for everybody or for even most people. Moving on from that, finally, divinity is inherent in all things, material and spiritual. The divine force is apparent in all life and form. And then after that, he says, the earth is actually one of the most divine forms of creation. This is the following sentence, or the 2 sentences after. And I, for one, love this. And in the earth is actually one of the most divine forms in all creation. This is a difference in Gnosticism. In Gnosticism, as I've been studying, is that we are in basically a hellscape of sorts, being the material world, and the seeking of gnosis, of knowledge of the inner knowing. Seeking that more and more is getting us closer to the light, to the all, and Gnostics in general don't see the earth as a divine creation. Now, I kind of disagree with Gnostics on this, only because I do see beauty all around. Now, this could be because it is a form of matter, and I am used to that, and I can see the beauty in it, but I think there are sparks of light in everything, so therefore, that would also make the earth a form of light, of that dispersal of light from the all. So I kind of disagree with Gnostics and kind of agree with Christopher here. I just wanted to note that little bit of a difference here, and of course, multiple practices within even the Gnostic traditions are going to be different. So, that just needs to be said, because not all Gnostics are going to agree, just like all Christians and all pagans and all Jewish individuals and all Muslims don't always agree. So, one of the things I disagree on. Anyway, at the bottom of the page here, page 42, and I want to kind of try to quicken this up here. He says, science is slowly catching up with the idea of the earth being alive and not a lifeless rock. British biologist James Lovelock first proposed the Gaia hypothesis in the 1970s after the Greek goddess Gaia, stating that all life, including humanity, is part of a complex biosphere organism. Others have extrapolated that hypothesis into a theory that the Earth is a living being and all things on Earth are akin to cells within her. And I just had a little note here. This is not the only thing that science is catching up with. And I think in this book we might actually see, because one of the chapters is about science, I think we might find a little bit more extrapolation on that, that science is starting to catch up with metaphysics. So kind of love that. Let's see, starting at the bottom of page 43 and going into page 44, I'm basically going to read 2 paragraphs to you for the most part. He says, perhaps the word monist, which means one who recognizes the divine in everything, is a more appropriate term, but most pagans identify themselves as polytheistic. Okay, anyway. Agree. Kind of love that. The gods and goddesses are expressions of that one spirit, leading to a more personal relationship with the divine. Love it. The one spirit is what I call the Great Spirit. The goddess and god move in the love of the Great Spirit. They are different aspects of the divine, and frequently some Wiccan traditions call this one spirit Drighton, a word said to be Anglo-Saxon and best translated to Lord, but without the gender quality, referring to the creative force that is both male and female, the source of all things. Some see this Great Spirit as the goddess exclusively, who gave birth to the god through her self-fertilization. Ancient myths, such as the Greek creation story, start with the goddess who gives birth to her son/husband to continue creation. Love this. This is pretty much part of my belief system right now, as it stands right now. Sophia and Christ came from the light, this Great Spirit, the Drighton figure, the all, some call it the universe. There are many different words for this all-powerful being that gave birth to gods and goddesses and whatnot. So I kind of wanted to read that so I could pay homage to that. Anyway, moving on 2 paragraphs down. Witches have nothing to do with the Christian devil. To believe in the devil, one must already believe in the Christian mythos, and some witches feel their spiritual roots predate Christianity. We are not naive. We do believe that harmful forces exist and precautions must be taken, but we do not subscribe to an ultimate author of evil or the concept of sin. An ultimate evil and the ultimate good is a polarity never found in nature. In Christian myths, God is all powerful, but the devil still exists. For this to be a true polarity, they must be equal to each other, but in Christian mythology, they are not. In Wicca, we focus on the polarity of the goddess and god and the love of their union that births life into being. Love is focus, not conflict. The concept of light versus dark, good versus evil, was actually adopted from Zoroastrian religions. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied today. And I just had a little note about this paragraph as a whole. Actually, a big note. This is not entirely true, but is true for most. I, for instance, believe in a force of evil that is out there. I do. I don't necessarily think it is an ultimate evil, nor do I think that there's a being of ultimate good. I think there is flaws. But I also believe that there is this being of that tends to be more evil than good. Primarily, I'd say probably 90% evil, 10% good. But the reason that this being is allowed to continue is not only for balance purposes, because you have the balance of good and evil and whatnot, but is allowed to continue to act because of free will. It is not this ultimate being. It is not their responsibility to overtake this evil being. It is the free will of the individual to do away with this evil being and to make it so much easier for an individual as this ultimate being would actually take away a lot of free will. So I think that's important to note. Up at the second paragraph of page 45, witches do not perform animal sacrifice, though it It may have been part of their distant history, as it is in Judaism and other religions. And I'll read the other part that I have underlined here in a minute. This is mostly true. There still are some offshoots, some branches, some traditions that still do animal sacrifices. In general, as a whole, as looking at all of paganism and all of witchcraft out there, I would say this is mostly a true statement. Again, you do have some individual traditions that will still do animal sacrifice, but it is a lot more rare than anything. So I just want to shine some light on that there are still some traditions that will do animal sacrifices, but it is fairly rare. He also says at the bottom of this paragraph, witches do not abuse children in or out of ritual as part of their faith, nor do we perform curses. Okay, first part, true. We do not abuse children. It's the same concept as a Christian performing child abuse. If somebody does that, it is not because their religion is telling them to, or that it is a part of their religion. It's because they're a piece of shit human being. So let's just get that out of the way here. The performing curses depends on the witch. You do have some witches that will perform curses or hexes or bindings or banishings and whatnot, and performing some of the more negative or more aggressive types of spell work. But as a whole, most pagans kind of steer away from that unless they absolutely need to. I mean, I've had situations where I've needed to do a binding on somebody, and it was absolutely needed. There were people's lives at risk. So, yeah, that's something that sometimes you just need to do. Next paragraph, he says, witches and other pagans do believe in and practice magic. And I have a little note here that says, not all pagans. There are some pagans that are more geared towards ritual aspects or more geared towards a devotional aspect than they are with metaphysics or magic of any kind. There are some that just steer away from it altogether because they're not entirely sure about that, and they don't really do any of that. So just a little note there about the painting with a broad brush. Next sentence is, magic is the art of making change and manifesting your dreams and banishing the things that no longer serve you and hold you back. And I love this definition, and I kind of want to steal that one. So I think I will. Thank you, Christopher Penzak. At the end of this paragraph, he says, magic is usually spelled with a K by modern practitioners to distinguish from illusion and sleight of hand tricks. This is one that I kind of go back and forth on. Sometimes I spell it with a K, sometimes I don't. It really depends on, how my hand is writing that day, if I want to put a K in or not. So, yeah, I don't always do it, and it's something that can be interchanged in my practice because very, very rarely do I ever talk about sleight of hand. They are illusionists. They are not magicians. So that there's the difference in whenever I'm speaking. So, yeah, that's where I would go with that one. In the next paragraph, I think it's the third sentence, the difference between spells and prayers is that witches study the nature of the universe and understand better how to create change. And I don't entirely agree. but I don't entirely disagree. And I do agree with somewhat agree with the next sentence. Many people who pray think it is a give it and take process where they give up something sinful to receive the boon of the prayer, though there is always an exchange of energies. Witches know the universe is ever abundant. Okay, so whenever we're talking about prayer, and I actually had somebody ask me to do a video on prayer if I haven't already done one, which I have not, I don't think. And I can't believe I've never done one on prayer. But I talked about rosaries this past week on Witchy Wednesday and how I use them. And whenever it comes to prayer, depending on how you pray or what you're praying for, it's not really a give and take. It's not you giving up a sinful nature or giving up of anything but time. Having a sacrifice of some sort from yourself could just be your time and your willingness to sit and be in that moment of contemplation with deity. That can be the same thing as doing spell work. You can, spend the same amount of time being in spell work, meditating and whatnot, the same as you do in prayer, and get the same results. The difference is, at least for me, in spell work, you may be asking for energetic sources or universal powers and energies to manifest something, whereas in prayer, you are asking an individual, usually a deity or a saint, to pray on your behalf. You are asking them specifically to help be an agent of change rather than sending out those energies into motion throughout the universe and creating change that way. I think they're both effective. I think they're both valid ways of practicing, and I think they're a lot more similar than they are different. So, yeah, I kind of agree and I kind of disagree in how he portrays prayer here. So, yeah, just gonna put that there. Just gonna hang a lantern on that. Maybe I might do a video on the differences between prayer and spell work in the future. After I do the prayer video, maybe I'll do a difference of spell work and prayer type of video. So let me know if you want to see that by leaving a comment below, letting me know that you want to see that video. Okay. Next paragraph, do we label ourselves white or black witches? This is done in the burning times, though the distinction of white and black magic can still be found in the initial lessons of high ritual magic. Most modern witches do not subscribe to it. Magic is ruled by intention. And I think this is important, and I think that we need to stop labeling things black and white magic as good or bad, or bad and good, respectively. And I think we need to kind of note that there is some underlying issues with racism that are systemically, the systemic racism is inherent in those definitions, and I think we need to start combating that as a community. So I just want to kind of put a note on that one. And then we get to the Wheel of the Year area. And so many of these will be addressed during the rest of the year. Not many disagreements, just a little nitpicking that I have for the Wheel of the Year. I'm not going to really nitpick right here, right now. I'm going to actually do or try to do videos for each Sabbath. So, yeah, I'm going to nitpick then, not necessarily right now. So, yeah. So, I need to keep in mind to come back to these and read those excerpts and nitpick around those times of the year, which we will be coming up on Candlemas here in the next couple weeks, right? Today is, almost 2 weeks. So, yeah, I gotta start nitpicking on one of these then. Anyway, the next comment that I have is, or the next note that I have, is at page 48. It is the last sentence of the next to last paragraph. And he writes, circles are cast in both Esbats and Sabbats or any other magical event, depending on the tradition. I love that he says, depending on the tradition. Whenever I was on the Pagan Perspective, I cannot tell you how many times I've answered the question about casting circles. I know I've answered that at least 2, 3, 4 times in the 10 years, and it seems to be a common thing that would come up as a question. I don't know if it's that people didn't watch the previous videos, or because we did get new hosts from time to time, that they were asking mainly for the new host's point of view. But I've answered it plenty of times, and it really does depend on the tradition, and depend not even on just the tradition, but on the individual person. So I am really glad that he chose to put this point into his writing here, that it depends on the tradition. And like I said, I would go a little bit further to say depending on the person. Okay. In the section of personal freedom, top of page 49, lastly, witches seek freedom from dogma, the freedom to personally delve into mysteries of the divine and find our own answers. There must be recommendations and guidelines in each tradition, but there is no official Bible. And if you can hear this in the background, I do apologize. I do work at a storage unit facility, and that's the gate for them to come in and out. I don't know exactly what they're doing. Should at very most be 8 digits. There you go. Okay. So they finally opened the gate. Or they finally got through the gate. Anyway, sorry. So I have here, one of the most favorable parts of this practice is the capability of having that personal freedom to delve into the mysteries of the divine and find your own answers, that you become your own clergy. There is no official book or record that you have to go by, that you must bear allegiance to. You can basically go against everybody else's notion and create your own path, your own practice, your own way of worship. And that is probably one of the most favorable parts of being a witch, is that you get to create your own way of being. About halfway through this paragraph, I have them underlined because I stopped taking notes. I'm just like, I want to underline. He writes, we are our own intermediaries to the goddess and God. Each individual strives to be his or her own clergy. Magic is used because it works, as is meditation and psychic abilities. We don't need to believe blindly because we are guided by experiences. Witches don't simply believe, we do. Such free spirits recognize that no one person or religion has the answer. And I love that he puts this in here, because it really shows the tolerance that many witches have. Not all of them, absolutely not all of them. I've had some pagans and witches out there who will flat out tell me that I'm wrong, and there's no such thing as Christo-Paganism, and I'm like, you know what, screw you, I don't need you, and I just walk away. So yeah, I love that he puts this out here, trying to make way for that tolerance. And he continues to say, being polytheists, we gladly acknowledge other points of view without being threatened. Love that. Again, promoting the tolerance. Last paragraph here, I believe it is. Some still feel anger over the persecutions of the past and blame dogma and intolerance, but for the most part, witches do not harbor any bias against other religions. We live and let live. And for the most part, that is true. There are many people that I have run into that are like, you know what, you do you. Christo-Paganism works for you. Fantastic, love it. Go about your business. And then there are some which will say, sit there and argue with me. And I think a lot of it is because they have this bias, because they come at it from a defensive posture of once being, pretty much shit on by a dogma and doctrine that did not agree with them, or that they did not agree with, or that told them that, everything about them was wrong or whatnot. I understand where they're coming from. The thing that they don't allow me to say is, that's not me, and they need to stop it. So, yeah, I have met those individuals. Gladly, it is much less than the overall majority of people that I run into in the witchy pagan community. Under the title of Traditions of Witchcraft, each of these paths within the craft contains a different focus. None are completely right or wrong, but are only correct for an individual at a certain time in life. Love that he puts this in there, because you can change your tradition. You are not necessarily stuck to Wicca, Alexandrian Wicca, Gardnerian Wicca. You're not stuck to, being in the fairy tradition, the Cabot tradition, all these other different traditions that he lists here. You are not stuck with that. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, just because I don't want to kind of put my own taste on these, because I don't know these different paths, these different practices as well as I know my own. So I can only speak on my own, which he does include Christian Wicca on page 50, which I consider myself a Christian Wiccan for a very long time. And here he says, and this is the only one that I'm going to comment on in the types of traditions title here. He says, Christian Wicca, although I was initially hesitant to add this category, the emergence of Christian witches is becoming more prevalent. Often, eclectic witches have no reason to leave behind their original Christian faith, and instead incorporate elements of both into their personal traditions. Folk magic served by veiling itself in Christianity and incorporating the mythology. Unfortunately, Christian Wiccans get curious looks from pagans who have renounced Christianity and see the two as incompatible. I love that he puts this in there. I am really respectful that he puts it in here. And it is true. You get a lot of curious looks, because there are many people that have gone away from Christianity for one reason or another, and they find the two as incompatible because they were told that it was incompatible, and they didn't try to go against that. And I kind of went against the grain there. I said, why can't these two intermix? And I find that they can. And then he goes into other magical traditions after that, which, again, I'm not going to really speak to, because I am not nearly versed enough in Druidry or Egyptian magical traditions to speak on these. So that basically ends out the chapter, except for this last paragraph, and I kind of want to read this paragraph to you guys because I think it's wonderfully written, wonderfully worded, and I kind of just want to, read it to you guys and kind of mull along with this, or mull it around my head here for a minute. Quite a number of other pagan traditions draw on different cultures, including Sumerian, Finnish, Slavic, Hindu, Asian, and Polynesian. Some subscribe to the name witch or Wicca, most do not. Many other traditions, associations, churches, groves, and covens exist, all practicing their own brand of the mysteries. The neo-pagan resurgence gives us all the spiritual freedom to devise the magical tradition we want and to claim the heritage, names, and titles that serve our highest good. Though it is always important to know where your practice comes from, the most important factor is to know where it is going. And I love that he puts this here, because this starts into chapter 4, where we actually, I believe, have our first exercise in the path of initiation. So he actually does give us our own first look into creating our own tradition, or doing our own initiation in the next paragraph, and I'm kind of loving it. And I love the way that he ends out this chapter, because no matter what your tradition is, we do have a lot of similarities, and there is a lot that we can agree on. There's so much that we can disagree on, and it's okay that we disagree. And the important factor, like he says, is to know where our practice is going, knowing where we're heading with our own practice, rather than focusing on the past and some hangups that we might have with one tradition or another. That should not be our focus in our practice, or as we go forward, should not be the focus of our practice. And noticing that we all have our way of finding our own brand of the mysteries, or of practicing our own brand of the mysteries. So I love that he says this. I think it's a wonderful paragraph, and I think I may need to copy that, or at least in some way put that in my Book of Shadows, because I think that is an important thing to keep in mind if I were to ever teach people formally. I think, as in a tradition, I think that is something that would need to be a focus point, or a focal point of when we're learning and when we're studying not only our own practice but the practice of others, and how we relate and what we can take away and what we need to leave behind of certain practices. I think that is always a good underlying thing, is that other people, they practice in other ways, or in different ways than us. Not necessarily good or bad, just different. So let me know what you thought of this chapter number 3. I tried to I ended up cutting out a lot of this, because there was probably about 8 pages worth of traditions here, which I think is great, and like 2 or 3 pages of the Wheel of the Year that I cut out. So, and again, those will be addressed later. If you see right here, I've actually tabbed out all the chapters, so I don't lose my place, if you were seeing that and wondering. But anyway, I digress. Okay, So I am going to have to edit this down a little bit. I did get a phone call for work. I had to go and look something up real quick on Facebook that somebody tagged me in and whatnot. So yeah, I am unfortunately going to have to edit this a little bit. And but yeah, let me know what you thought about the third chapter of the Inner Temple of Witchcraft by Christo-Pagan. Again, I'm going to try to leave a thing in the bottom bar. And you know what? Is that actually coming up reverse for you? I don't know. Anyway, it might be. So yeah, let me know what you think. And yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow on Sunday when we are talking about, what are we talking about? Get my planner here. We are talking about statuary and iconography, so that should be fun. I'm actually going to try to shoot that. I'll probably do that tomorrow night because I can show you guys some of the different icons and some of the different what you call it, statuary that I have. Trying to find words here, but yeah, I can actually share those with you. Take you on a tour of what certain figures mean to me and why I have them. So yeah, that's about where I'm going to leave this. I hope to see you guys tomorrow on Sunday with statuary and iconography. And until then, may you have love, hugs, and ladybugs. Bye-bye.